All right, so let's get in this tonight. I'm glad everybody's here. It's always weird for me to kind of pick up in a lesson that we're in the middle of that I didn't start, but we're good. Over the last couple of classes, we have had really good discussion on things that challenge us, things that challenge our faith. And I want to keep that going tonight. So kind of getting into that. When Joe left off on Sunday, he was talking about imposters, and what that can mean. And we all know generally what that can look like, but I think sometimes it can be hard for us to think of spiritual imposters, like what that means, why somebody would choose to go down that path, why somebody would choose to mislead or misrepresent. And I think as we get into this tonight, we can see that there are reasons for that. And I think there are limitedly genuine reason, but disingenuine as well. And so we're gonna talk about all of that. But first of all, let's talk about the idea of being religious. I mean, I think that's something that we hear a lot. We've talked about being a disciple and what a disciple is, how you become a disciple. But I think when we're talking about culturally, we hear spiritual, religious, with some regularity. And so when you think about that, the idea of being spiritual, the idea of being religious, what does that look like? Just give me an idea, like in general, ideas. What does that look like? If you say, many of us in here have said, our friends, our associates, people we know have commented about us, that we are religious. So what does that mean? What does that look like?
I think it's easy to associate just going to church as being religious.
Hmm?
I think people might take that to mean that someone's religious.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, generally, when I'm talking to people about spiritual things, I don't like to use the word religion because it puts a very kind of cliche blanket look, on things, and it's a whole lot more. Following God is about following the truth. It's not about being religious, quote unquote.
All right, you got way ahead, and we are gonna talk about that. But I think very good. Yes, I think that's right. Going to church is a big thing. Especially if people know that we do that. What, Joe?
Kind of associated with what you're saying, I think that usually your level of involvement with whatever religious organization you're part of is how people would judge how religious you are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily how much it affects your personal life. It's like, okay, well, how many events are you going to? How much are you assisting? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Any other thoughts, ideas?
I would definitely say that I feel like going to a more Christian, well, I don't know if it's a Christian school, but a faith-based school, period, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We're all religious. We all go to chapel. We all do these things. Every professor has to have a Bible verse at the end of their emails. They're religious. But I feel like as a society, we put religion as like, and along with Christianity, I'm a Christian, but like, and I love God, but it's not really my religion. So what are you? Because if they have to go, they almost like go hand in hand. But then you have the ones who are like, I don't go to church, but I believe in God, and I'm religious.
Actually, I really liked where Emma went with that in the middle there, because something that I have run into, and I'm sure you guys have too, are the people that say, "Well, I'm a Christian, but I'm not very religious." I have a hard time connecting that. So you're going to claim to be a Christian, but do that and not be religious, not be spiritual, not like how does that work? What are you doing? And I think everything that you guys have said is spot on. I think in general, if we plain and simply talk about God, I think we're viewed at as religious. There was a time in my life a bunch of years ago that the people that I worked with always referred to me as churchy. Oh, Todd, he's like really churchy. There was a group of us that were more so, and working within a much more liberal environment, with a bunch of actors and weird people, and if you were churchy, you really stood out in that. So but hey, if you want to think of me as churchy, I'm not gonna dissuade you from that. I think that's good. But to look religious, to be considered religious, is there necessarily any value in that? And I think that's what we need to get to the core of, what we need to really understand. If we are not following the blueprint, if we're not following the design that God gave us, are we truly religious? Or are we just looking a certain way? Are we coming across a certain way? Because if we're not following that blueprint that we've mentioned and talked about throughout this quarter, that look doesn't mean anything. So let's turn to Matthew chapter 7. All right. All right, Matthew chapter 7, and we are going to look at verses 21 through 23. And a lot of the verses we're going to look at tonight are verses that we've looked at, so they're going to be verses we're familiar with, but I think it's good to look at these and relate them to things we're talking about tonight. All right, verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. I think it is so relevant to us to see these were people who looked religious. These were people who were putting off an image. They were presenting themselves in a certain way, but did it mean anything? It was nothing. It was garbage. Tony.
I think it reminds me of the passage. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in the gospel accounts where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, I'm pretty sure, and he's talking about the cup and how the outside of the cup is so clean, but the inside's not, so you can't drink from it. So I think it's the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Joe.
I would say it's not that exact passage, but I was looking at one that's similar to what Tony was talking about. Matthew 23, 27. It says, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You're like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness.
Yeah. The outside can look amazing. It can look great. It can give that image. But if the core is not real, if the core does not put out what the image is, doesn't mean anything. You know, I've mentioned before, and I know we've all heard before, you know, the idea of reputation in character. You know, I think for the most part, we want a good reputation. We want to be thought of well, you know, and you know, when I look at us here, you know, I think we all have that good reputation, you know, but what is my character? You know, I always think of my character, who I am when I'm by myself, when no one else is watching, when no one else sees me. What am I doing? How am I living my life? Am I still letting my light shine? You know, when we think, well, what good does it let your light shine when you're by yourself? But when I'm by myself, if I'm still letting my light shine, that's who I am. That will be at the core of who I am. You know, does my character match my reputation? Or is my reputation all good and shiny and bright, but my character might not be so great a guy? You know, I think it's important for us to have that understanding and have the two come together equally. All right, let's look at a couple warnings that we can read in the New Testament. Turn to 2 Timothy chapter 4. All right, and this is something that Joe read on Sunday morning. And Craig, when you get there, will you read verses 3 and 4? Chapter 4, 3 and 4.
For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths.
You know, we need to be fully aware of what it is we're doing, what it is we're hearing, what it is we're looking for. You know, when you know, they talk about they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. They want to hear what they want to hear. You know, we've mentioned several times throughout this quarter, you know, what being a disciple is, what being a Christian is. You know, and it's not taking the Bible and molding the Bible to my life. It's conforming my life to God's word. You know, it's me being the way He would have me to be, the way He would have me to live, not putting me first, but just the opposite of that, putting Him first. You know, and what are we looking for? You know, are we being caught up in something good that someone is saying? If that good isn't truth, then is it really good? You know, is it taking me off of my journey to heaven? Or is it keeping me going on that path? You know, we need to always remember, you know, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to look for? You know, what am I looking like? Who am I trying to get the approval of? You know, that I think that's something that we really need to focus on. Turn back to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. All right, 2 Corinthians chapter 4. When somebody gets there, we're going to read verses 3 and 4 here again in 2 Corinthians chapter 4.
You got it, Todd.
All right, thanks, man.
2 Corinthians 4, 3 and 4.
Yep.
And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, in whose case The God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God.
Think about that. That we could get so caught up in hearing things that may not be truth, but we can get caught up in the idea that somebody may be presenting to a point where we don't see the truth, that we would literally be blinded to the truth, because we're not focused on what God has shown his light on, that we could be caught up in something else that would, again, take us off that journey to heaven. Where do we want our mind? Where do we want our heart? Are we focused on the things of this world, or are we focused on the things of heaven? And when we have a heart, a mind that is focused on the things of heaven, we will see through the things that are not truth, or hopefully we will see past those things. So, I started to get ahead of myself. Turn to 2 Thessalonians. All right. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. All right. 2 Thessalonians 2, and we're going to look at verses 9 through 12. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, God will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned, who do not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. I mentioned on Sunday that I thought, one of the most powerful lines that Kevin wrote in this lesson, and I think it's so true: Satan is real and he is powerful. These verses define that. They exemplify that. That Satan will use anything and everything to get us off our path. He doesn't care. He will do everything. I think it's, one of the other things that I really thought was interesting in this lesson. If you have your book and it's open, I'm looking at page 126. When you think about Satan and the fact that he's real and he's powerful, Satan works through college professors, bosses, significant others, protesters on college campuses, co-workers, friends, and family members. Satan works through media, entertainment, and pop culture. I think that last sentence we would automatically, think media, entertainment, and pop culture. I mean, we can see Satan boldly through those things. But it's that first part that I don't think we really appreciate like we need to. Think about that. Satan works through college professors, bosses, significant others, protesters on college campuses, co-workers, friends, and family members. I don't think any of us would say that we have family members that are like, I'm going to drag you to hell. But can that happen? Can we get caught up with that? We've talked so many times this quarter about the importance, the value, in it throughout our lives of surrounding ourselves with the right people. Are we surrounding ourselves with godly people? People that are lifting us up, encouraging us, walking with us on the path. That I think part of why that statement meant so much to me is I grew up in a family where I was so blessed that my parents are Christians, and that I had their example to look up to. Beyond that in my family, I don't have people that are Christians in my family, except one uncle, my mom's brother, who I won't get into him. He was like my favorite uncle. He was awesome. But my family, my extended family, are not people that I'm close with. They're not people that I spend time with because of the kind of people that they are. And I think, we need to look at the mundane. Who do we come in contact with on a daily basis? Who are the people that we see in our regular everyday lives? And are they the influence, are they the influence on us, or how are we letting our light shine on them? Joe.
I think this verse really speaks to something that I struggle with a lot, and that's that someone's level of genuineness has nothing to do with how true what they say is. And that makes it challenging because there's a lot of very genuine people who are very misguided. And I think this verse tells us that very few people, kind of like you were saying, very few people are out to get others spiritually, but I think ultimately most people think that they're coming from a righteous place because very few people, it's like the classic no villain thinks they're a villain. They always think that they're in the right, and I think we're all that way. So we have to be careful that we don't measure our own, as far as our own, how much we are following Scripture by how genuine I feel or how good I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how much are we actually studying His Word?
No, I think that's a great point. Looking, I don't want to go back and spend a lot of time, but, we looked at Matthew 7:21 through 23, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven. I think another way of looking at that, and think about this. Can people be sincere and be wrong? That's scary. When you think about your circle, think about your friends outside of this place. Well, we all know people, we all have friends outside of here. How many of them truly believe, especially going back to the idea of religious, how many of our religious friends truly believe they're right? How many of them sincerely think that the path that they are on is the right path? That how many of them sincerely believe that, we're all on a different path, but all those paths are going to the same place?
I have a really good friend who, actually this conversation came up just a few days ago. And they've grown up in the church. They've grown up with Christian, I would say Church of Christ Christian parents. And went off to college. First year was rocky. The second year decided to do some decided to do some very dumb things. And they called me this week and was like, Emma, I don't know, I'm doing the right thing. And I was like, no, you're not. Like, you gotta stop. Like, you say you want to go to heaven and you want to do these things. You know the truth. You've grown up in this. And practically was like, no, like, I know that I'm right. And I said, okay, go read 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12. He was like, no. And I was like, read it out loud. Read it out loud, hear it for yourself, because if you're doing unrighteous things, this is what's going to happen. And it took a few minutes and came back around to, you're right. And I said, it's not me that's right. This is right. My Bible is right. God is right, because these things are what you want to happen. And the path that they're on is not going to be beneficial to them. And you have to, as a Christian, you also have to guide the people around you with a soft heart, because if you push too far, you'll lose them. And as one who you care about these people so much and you want them to come back, it's hard for you to say, go read that. Because you know in your heart they're wrong. And so it's taken a few days, but Emily, you were right. Like, I'm not doing the right things. I need to fix my ways. And so it's hard to have that conversation, but it has to happen.
Absolutely. We cannot be afraid to let our light shine. We can't be afraid to have that hard discussion, that hard conversation. And it is hard. But, when you think about how serious is it if we accept the wrong religious path? Listen to this in 2 John verse 9. Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. If you think about that, if we are not on that right religious path, that one path on our journey to heaven, we don't have God. He couldn't have said it any plainer than that, any simpler than that. That's something very serious. We need to be fully aware of that and be fully aware when we're talking to people, that how are we talking with them about that? How are we letting our light shine to them? Are we, one of the things that Joe and I were talking about, we have the responsibility to plant seeds. That is what we have been commanded to do. And as we go through our lives, are we planting seeds or are we digging up the garden? I mean, if we're digging up the garden, we may really need to reevaluate how, why, what we are doing to make sure that we are letting our light shine the way God would have us let our light shine. Oh, I'm down to like 2 minutes, of course. It's amazing how fast that happens. I think it's so important for us to remember, truth matters. We've talked over these 3 classes about not being persuaded, and I will finish up some of this on Sunday morning and then get us into what we'll be talking about next. So we're not necessarily done with this, but truth matters. Ultimately, that's what we need to understand. That's what we need to know. That's what we need to present. That's what we need to believe, the truth. Turn over to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians 4, and we're going to look at verse 21. Actually, let's start in 20. But you have not so learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus. And then turn back to John chapter 8. Right, John 8, and we're going to look at verses 31 and 32. Emma, are you there? Read verses 31 and 32, hon.
Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, wait, where is it?
That's good, right there. It's simple. If we abide in his word, you are my disciples. That's another thing that we've talked throughout this quarter. How much are we spending time in God's word? The first several weeks of the quarter, we really talked a lot about understanding our Bible in how to use our Bible. What is that? For a lot of us, that was very reminder, very remedial. But are we doing it? Are we using our Bible? Are we in our Bible? Are we spending that time on a daily basis knowing God, knowing his word? All right, Sunday, we're gonna continue with this a little bit more, but I want to talk about 3 of the questions at the end of this lesson. So I want you guys to look at those and be ready to talk about that. Questions 3, 4, and 5 that are right at the end of the lesson. All right, so we will start there on Sunday. All right, thanks you guys. I appreciate everybody being here.